and welcome to the Power of Connection show in Biz. We have an amazing show today. I'm, of course, Kimberly Layne, Leadership and Engagement Coach, and your host. Today, our guest is President and CEO of a global C-suite mastermind and networking organization. In addition, he's Managing Director of Network Strategies, which is a premier provider of strategic development and executive performance programs. He's well known as a thought leader and a great speaker on the fields of innovation, next practices, and entrepreneurship. Please welcome our guest, Scott Hamilton.
Kimberly, thanks. Thanks for the invitation today.
Glad to have you here. In the midst of all that's going on, it's nice to have just some personal interaction and a chance to connect, right?
Absolutely.
So as we talk about the power of connection, which is what the show is all about, you're a great connector, and I think that's why I've enjoyed being a part of the advisory group here at ENP. Can you share with what's your philosophy around the power of connection, leveraging that to support leaders, organizations, businesses, and obviously the local community?
Well, you know, this is very unique power of passion, if you will, executive next practices. It's also known as Entrepreneurial or Enterprise Next Practices Institute. Has been around for about 11 years, and it was created, just to your point, based on making new connections, making authentic connections across the business community and other community organizations. And so that's been our purpose, is really bringing together the top leaders of organizations to really look at what's coming next.
Exactly, yes, love it. So then you say you've been around for over a decade. I probably would bet that you have not had this unprecedented experience or anything similar to that, right, in the course of that decade. So, as you always are great, and ENP is great about providing insights on emerging trends and transformative strategies, what would be your thoughts or talk to the audience and to leaders and organizations about, are we ever going to go back to a normal, or is there a new normal, or what is that going to all look like?
Well, here's the thing. We did a survey in January of this year, 2020, of 3,500 CEOs about what they expected. And guess what? They were prepared for turmoil. They were anticipating that even then, before we knew about all the current crisis, that the velocity of markets, that the challenges in markets were such that they needed to be concerned about being nimble.
Oh, wow.
They were concerned about being adaptable, and they were concerned about being blindsided by new ideas coming into their marketplace. So really, people were prepared to act quickly this year. However, the big unknown was not getting hit with this larger crisis that was worldwide, that impacted everyone at once. That's the big black swan, as we know, to this whole thing. So again, people in the back of their minds, they were prepared for change. Right. Probably not this much change.
Right. So, you know, in crises, right, we really need to connect. I mean, that's the way we heal. That's the way we are able to keep our anxieties down and our uncertainties down, and how we deal with all that. And I think the worst part of this pandemic is we've not been able to get together in person and have that one method of healing, if you will, right? I think you've done a great job of taking your live events and pivoting and making them into virtual events. Are you still getting the same reach from a global perspective? And what is that looking like from your perspective on attendance and reach, and still providing that kind of connection that we all need for leaders, for organizations in the community?
Well, if anything, our audience has expanded, Kimberly, over the past several months. At day 2 of the shutdown, we went through these virtual events on a global level, and we're actually seeing people from as many as 60 plus countries come in and view what's going on. The other thing is people really want that connection.
Yes.
And so absent connection, absent information, people always fill in the blank with something negative.
Exactly.
These connections we're creating, this content we're putting forward, help reassure people about that there is a direction forward, there is a way forward, there are ideas out there and people that can support them in this kind of environment. So if anything, we've increased the number of opportunities for people to get connected with each other, meet people not only in their own industry, but also outside their industry.
Yeah, exactly. You've been really done a great job in pivoting, but I think what also you've done is because you're extremely consistent. You didn't really miss a beat on an event, maybe went from live to virtual, but there was that consistency in content, attendance, messaging, and also I think there's kind of some comfort in that from a security perspective and knowing we can somewhat continue as business as usual, though it's a lot different. We're still moving forward, right? You did mention a point as far as crossing boundaries, and this is one of my really favorite boundaries, but domains or industries, if you will. And I love how whenever you begin an event, you'll always talk to and speak to that one way to innovate, one way is to transform to the next level, is to really, as a leader or as an organization, be willing to cross those domains, those industries, right? Do you have one or two stories of a company or a leader that's done that, and what kind of results have they achieved?
Well, there's a lot of different stories, but going back to your point, I'll start with this, and the fact that our meetings, as you know, are not one single industry. We have
Right.
representatives from as many as 20 different industry sectors. Secondly, the people attending these sessions we have all represent the entire C-suite and beyond. They're usually director level and above. They represent finance, operations, purchasing, CEOs, CFOs, COOs. And we're doing that because this difference of perspectives around an issue is so critical for us to then create new ideas. These collision of ideas, these collision of different industries often produce these different opportunities. And a lot of times it's always something outside your domain where people can see something clearer.
Right.
They're not encumbered by legacy thinking, the ways we've looked at things over years and years. So the easy examples, of course, the time-proven examples are the Netflix model, where Blockbuster had the brick and mortar in terms of delivering video, and then Netflix, of course, went to live streaming. Even though Blockbuster was right there, they had it in their
Right.
hands where they could do the live streaming and ignored it. Same thing, we've had the age-old story about Kodak, of course, and ignoring the opportunities in digital photography, even though they incubated the concept of digital photography in their own labs, but again, chose to ignore it, to stick to chemicals and paper. So it's, those are the long-term, long-standing examples. We're seeing, however, even for smaller companies, they're seeing the advantage of looking outside their industry domain at how other people are interacting with their customers, how they're delivering product, how they're fulfilling their value proposition, and saying, all right, they do it this way in the airline industry, what implications does that have for us in the hospital sector? And looking at crossing over those ideas.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like there's going to be a lot of that in order to pivot in this time. For any size business, they're going to have to really be open to looking at how other people are doing it or pivoting or surviving during this time and try to adopt those strategies that work for them, right?
Yeah, you're using the word pivot, and that used to be also used in the same sentence as making a mistake, but it's just the opposite.
Right.
We want to be learning from what's going on and being prepared to pivot when we need to and do it on a timely basis. So viewers may be looking at this a month from now, 6 months from now, 2 years from now. At this current time, people are looking day to day at what's happening because they have to. There's not a clear path forward
Right.
at this point. At the same time, they are also looking 6 months, 12 months ahead to say, here's what might happen, and starting to develop scenarios so that they can at least have something to shoot for. Now, those scenarios may change over time, but at least they're starting to develop some paths forward and looking at new ways that they can innovate.
So given your knowledge base of emerging trends, can you give us any insight to where you see 6 months from now possibly, or what they're kind of shooting for by chance?
Well, one thing is we know for sure, at least for the time being, we'll go to something like a hybrid environment, certainly
okay.
where you've got people in virtual environments plus those that can be co-located together in a socially distanced world. I mean, it's already happening in a lot of places, as you can tell. So the hybrid environment is here for a while. We'll see how permanent that is. There have been some very famous examples of companies that went all virtual and then had to come back and pull people back in. Now, that was also in a different times of technology where virtual connection was not as robust. Now we've got the tools out there that can make connection. The thing we have to remember is, and the thing we have to focus on, is the fact that people still desire human interaction, number one. Second, they tend to create and imagine better when they're in groups. They start to get ideas serendipitously, run into someone in a hall, or have a side conversation in a group that may spark an idea for them that may not happen necessarily spontaneously on a Zoom call.
Right.
So those are the things we have to watch for. At what point do we really want to have this human interaction again to really do deep dive, deep thought on issues? The other issue that we work a lot with these virtual firms now that we're concerned about is that people fully engaged. And that is when they're making a commitment to engage with you, are they really making that commitment or just waiting for the Zoom call to end? Right. So it's, are we really getting legitimate engagement?
Right.
Is someone that has a contrary idea, are we allowing them to speak? Or again, are they just nodding their heads, yes, we understand, and then they go their own direction? So those are the things we are concerned about that we usually are able to deal with more effectively in a live environment.
Yeah, some great points you made there about the whole Zoom and are people really being present. I think they almost, in a way, they can hide, right? If there's enough people talking during that hour, they can kind of just log off when the Zoom call's over and kind of go back to what they were doing, right? Versus sometimes I think if you're in an open setting and you can actually go around the table and ask people questions and you can see whether they're really engaged or not. It's a little bit more difficult on a Zoom call, right? So now you're managing director of network strategy. So what would you be recommending to those organizations you're talking to as far as moving forward on strategic development and planning for the future?
Well, here's the interesting thing. NextWORKS strategy's been around for a decade now as well. The things we've always looked at and encouraged people to do is constantly align and engage their team. And that is tap the collective intelligence of their entire organization. Here's an interesting thing. A lot of times people weren't listening to that message about how to tap the collective intelligence. We might have gotten some passive-aggressive response on that. But the point is, now people are starting to realize you've got to really reach in and engage every part of your workforce. In the virtual environment right now, the advantage is people are closer to the customer, they're closer to practices and policies, and they're starting to see the cracks where things don't work, where there are too many handoffs, too many things to do. We were working with a public organization recently where just purchasing took 8 steps and 5 levels of approval.
Oh, wow.
And so it was taking months to get anything done. So people are really sensitized now to seeing what's working and what's not. So our advice now, again, is to figure out how you're going to engage that entire organization around your purpose, around your vision, and your strategy. Secondly, we made a speech this past week where we said, consider July 6th your new January 1st. Because again, it's a new year. We're all on a different playing field now. So with a new January 1st, what does that tell you? Probably time to pull your team off on a virtual strategic offsite. You can't take them to a hotel somewhere.
Right.
We can't go on a trip. But we can create a unique virtual experience where we're engaging the entire team and getting legitimate ideas from them as to how to move forward. So there's a lot of excitement about people doing that now. And again, it's really a critical technique that people need to take on at this stage.
Yeah, very well said. I like that. You made me think of something. I work often with Gallup a couple times and ping them just from a resource and content perspective. And I called them up and I said, during this pandemic, isn't it being a little bit more glaring on what's right and what's wrong? So for example, if you're a really bad leader before this, you're really bad now because all of a sudden now you're having to engage employees that you weren't really connected with to begin with, now in a remote environment, right? Yep. Or if you were a really good leader, you're very in tune with what's going on with your employee because now they're having difficulty with homeschooling the kids, or just you can tell they're overwhelmed, or you know what I mean? So it's just really creating a definitive line about what's working and what isn't, and,
Really
you're seeing that with your clients as well.
Well, we're certainly seeing that, and the greatest advice we can give leaders at this point is that when they're working with their team and their team members, they're really now working with the entire family, whatever that is. It's if it's a spouse, it's a partner, it's
Right.
whatever their home situation is. Realize that you're dealing with a whole person now. You're not just dealing with that one facet of a person you used to see when they walked into the office. You're dealing with the entire ecosystem they have surrounding them at their home. So be sensitive and aware of that in your discussions with them. And it is an opportunity, however, to get to know the person at a deeper level,
Correct.
at a more personal level, but also being sensitive to the boundaries about how far you want to go with that,
Right.
that conversation. So I tend to go on the plus side of this, that we'll get to know people at a deeper level, a more personal level, and the day when we get back together in a in-person environment, it's just strengthened the team that much more. But going back to your point, this has significantly pointed out leaders that can't lead in this environment, where they might have been able to get by with position power or title power in the
Right.
past, and now it's showing those that really legitimately cannot connect with others, inspire them to act, motivate them to follow them up the hill. So yeah, the virtual environment certainly sees that.
Yep. Yeah. I definitely see that, and I think it's really glaring for some individuals. So it'll be interesting to see when and if they go back to a in-person environment, are those leaders still going to be there, or hopefully the employees have decided to leave. That could be another ramification of just not having good leadership during this time. When things kind of get a little bit more settled, will employees say, you know what, I'm done, and in one of the worst parts of my life in the last decade, this person wasn't there for me. Are they going to look for something else? I don't know. Time will tell, and obviously with the economy and jobs, we don't know yet. But time will tell that, right? We'll see that in the future.
Yeah, well, and I was just going to say, you brought up something for me, and that is that this has been true before the current crisis. That is, your best players are always on the lookout for environments that will stimulate them, make them feel included, allow them to share their best ideas. That hasn't changed in this virtual environment. So you've got to find a way of, again, continuing to inspire people, make sure they're included, give them a decision-making authority to get things done in this environment, because when they come back, whatever that hybrid environment is, they're going to be looking for it. And if they can't find it, they'll find it somewhere else.
You're right, and that's going to, I think, become even more important as the millennials become a predominant part of our workforce.
Absolutely.
I guess 75% of the workforce will be millennials in 2025.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
The need to pull them in collaboratively, not micromanaging, giving them some value as far as validation, responsibility, feeling like they're giving input and it's being appreciated. All those things of what you just mentioned are going to be so critical, I think, moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in closing, I always like to end by giving the viewers 3 main points or 3 kind of takeaways. And what would you like to provide with regards to moving forward to stay highly competitive, deeply connected, and to kind of avoid those possible blind spots that might hit us and derail us from where we're trying to go, especially in a competitive marketplace? So any thoughts for that?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is, if you can help embed a futurist mindset across your entire workforce, that is, turn everyone into a futurist, so they're thinking strategically about where things are going for them personally and for the organization as a whole. The more skill sets and adaptability you can bring in there, bring that capability to the forefront, that's going to be incredibly useful. Secondly, it all starts with your purpose. And I've told folks now, you need to look at your core purpose as an organization. Does it still fit? Is it still fit for today's marketplace? Does it still connect with multi-generations that are looking for that kind of meaning out of their work? If not, you need to revisit why you exist as an organization. And then the third part, which is closely related to that, is it still requires leadership that can inspire people to follow them. That's always been there. A leader that is clear, concise, consistent, has the integrity in messaging. Those are time-tested principles of a leader that need to remain. And again, we talked about it earlier, those that can really connect at a personal level with individuals and with large groups. The best leaders are able to leverage themselves, whether they are in the room or not. So this has been true again before the crisis and will continue well after, and that is, what is your organization leverage as a leader? Can you replicate yourself every day in the workforce lives in terms of what you stand for, what the company stands for, and where we're going? If you can get those messages across without even having to be there, then that's really the winning combination.
Oh yeah, and you're definitely an impactful leader if you're able to do that even when you're not in the room, right?
Yeah.
So I love that. Futuristic thinking, making sure you have a purpose, but I think even now, making sure your purpose is relevant,
Yep.
because you might have done, your whole mission, vision in January. I'm sure that's changed, and hopefully your people are revisiting that as an organization, and then continuing to have their leaders be inspiring and want people to follow and want people to be mentored by them and to, I guess, even represent them when that leader's not even in the room, for the values, for the leadership, for the community, for the results that they get, right? So
Yeah, and I guess, since we're in a time of change and people questioning long-standing beliefs, long-standing politics, long-standing structures, you should do the same with your own organization. Allow people to challenge the legacy structures and standards in your organization. They're going to question, why does this policy exist? Why does this practice exist? Why are we leading this way? Why are we selecting people based on this criteria? Allow them the opportunity to question everything, because ultimately that will strengthen your team and strengthen the organization.
Exactly. I think that is a great place to end. Scott, I cannot thank you enough for being here today on the Power of Connection show in biz. Some great takeaways, I think, and we'll look forward to hopefully having you back.
I'd love to.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for spending the time with us today on the Power of Connection in biz. I'm Kimberly Layne, your host, and I look forward to seeing you next week.